In this lesson, we will add thickness to the character sweater. From the previous lesson, we learned that the cloth was still a bit too loose, and there were also areas where there's some intersection between the cloth and the character's skin. So these are some issues that we will address in this lesson, and by the end of it, we'll have a really nice look to our sweater. Let's go ahead and get started. With it selected, we'll move right to the attribute editor. I'll just use Control A for that. And we'll scroll up until we find our self-collide width scale channel. Now, as we start to tweak this, let's go ahead and use the solver display so we can visually see this change. Remember, this parameter is going to help us add more thickness while at the same time visually not clumping up our geometry. So it's not going to bloat the geometry at all, but what it will do is help us to prevent interpenetration. So I'm going to go ahead and start to increase this to about a value of 4 or so. You could see the thickness starting to be adjusted on our sweater. Great. To round this value out, again, I'll go ahead and bring this to 4. And now we can go ahead and start to scroll down until we find our friction channel. We saw that the cloth was sliding a bit too much, so we can start to increase our friction to prevent that sliding from happening. I'm going to go ahead and increase this to about 0.9, just a little bit more, because we still want some slight sliding, but not as much as we had before. Another way to prevent sliding is to adjust our stickiness channel, but we wouldn't want to increase this too much. We don't want the sweater glued to our character. So let's go ahead and set this to a very low amount of 0.05. Great, and now we can start to adjust our dynamic properties. So before we do that, we'll set our solver display to off, and now we can go in and start to adjust our stretch resistance and compression resistance. Let's go ahead and increase these quite a bit. The stretch resistance, we're going to go ahead and bring this to about a value of, let's say, 85. Now our compression resistance, let's also increase this, but not so much. We still want a bit of compression as the character hops. We still want the result of a nice fold as it happens. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this to about a value of 30. Now the bend resistance, we're going to want to bring up quite a bit so we don't have the mesh caving in. So by setting this to a higher value, let's say to about 20, again, can get some really nice folds that we would expect to see in a sweater. Alright, so now we can go ahead and scroll down until we find our mash channel. Now 0.6 worked well for a t-shirt, but our sweater is a bit heavier. So we're going to go ahead and increase this to, let's say, about a value of 1. Our lift, this is an aerodynamic property. This creates the illusion of air passing through our cloth. And we still want a bit of that, especially as the character hops around, but not so much. So I'm going to leave this value set to 0.05. I think that works well. And the same thing goes for the drag. Found that the drag looked pretty decent. It was a cloth that was a bit too loose, so I'm going to leave the drag as is. Our dampen value, this is what we'd use to remove energy from the cloth so it doesn't look too springy. And as of right now, I don't think it looks springy. I think it just needs more thickness. So we're going to leave this as is. And the next thing we will adjust is on our rigid body surface. Let's go ahead and select our character, and under collisions, let's go ahead and scroll down. Actually, under quality settings, here we go. We'll find trap check. Now this is a wonderful option here. This is going to help us to have whatever points that may intersect kind of push out a bit as they cross over. So what we can then do is adjust the push out amount to something very low, let's say about 0.1. But again, by using trap check, it will help us to resolve any issues where we have the mesh kind of crunching in too much. It'll kind of do its best to push those points out so that does not happen. All right, great. So this would be a great time to recache our sweater. Let's do that. We'll send our character back to his T-stance on frame 0. We'll select our sweater. Now we need to remove all of that old cache data, kind of clean things up. We'll go to our options. You can see that we could delete our files or keep the files that we have currently, I tend to just kind of clean everything out. So we'll go ahead and choose delete files and choose delete. And now we're ready to create a new cache. Again, our sweater has been cached. Now it's time to do another play blast to take a look at what those settings have done. Before we do, let's go ahead and select our character sweater, and we'll press the 3 key to view it in smooth preview mode. Chances are when we decide to render this animation out, we'll of course want everything to be nice and smooth. And so smooth preview will help us to get an idea of how things will look at render time. I'm also now going to go to the View menu and choose our camera bookmark. So from there, we can go ahead and start a play blast. Here it is. How exciting is that? Not only have we removed the interpenetration that we were experiencing, but we also, in the end, have a very nice feel to the sweater. Very fun. Now, before we close this lesson off, I'd like to show you a few more parameters we can adjust to enhance the quality of this cloth object. So let's go ahead and close this out. We'll go ahead and select our cloth. And what we'll do is go ahead and take a look at its quality settings. So you can see its max iterations are up quite a bit, and that's great. I think one thing we could also increase is the self-collide iterations. That's kind of low. So in order to improve the result of that parameter, we can go ahead and increase this value quite a bit. Might set this to about 40 or so. Great. The higher the iterations, the better our cloth will look. But that also means that the time it takes to cache the cloth will increase. All right, let's scroll down. You can see that we also have a trap check setting that we can adjust here. So we can always go ahead and enable that. We need to be very careful about this push out value. Sometimes it works when we increase this, but at times, if this is up too high, this may tend to push our points out too much, and we again run into interpenetration. So we just need to be very careful about this value. I might set it to about 0.05. Also notice that we can adjust the push-out radius and a crossover push-out, again, in order to prevent any interpenetration issues. But we're looking really good right now, so I don't think that we need to tweak any of the crossover push-off values at all. Great. Now, the next thing I'd like to point out to you, before we create a new cache, let's head over to our outliner. The next thing I'd like to show you is the nucleus node. Again, we have properties here to adjust how well our cloth is cached. If we were to go ahead and scroll down until we find our solver attributes, notice we can adjust our substeps for better quality, and we can also increase our max collision iterations for better accuracy. So these two play together. We need to be very careful here. If we notice that there's way too much sliding in our cloth, we'd want to make sure that the sub-step value is a bit higher than our max collision value. I tend to keep the sub-step value around 40, find that works well, and the max collision iterations half the amount, about 20. Great, so next, it's time to go ahead and create another cache. So we'll go ahead and start back from our initial state on frame 0. Let's go ahead and clear out the data, and I'll pause the video and create a new cache file. Once again, the cloth has been cached. I think this is going to look really nice. Let's go ahead and create another play blast from our camera angle and take a look. Here's the play blast. How incredible is that? We have an amazing sweater simulation. And only took adjusting a few really cool parameters tied to our end cloth system. So we do have the chords to worry about. Let's go ahead and move to the next lesson and take care of simulating those items.